If you think medieval castles were just grand halls, shining armor, and fairy tale kings, don't skip this video, because the truth is darker than you can imagine. Behind those towering stone walls, like the ones at Tower of London, people didn't just live, they suffered. Castles were not built for comfort. They were built for fear, for control, for survival. From the outside, they looked powerful, untouchable. But inside, cold stone corridors, damp air, the smell of smoke, sweat, and sickness. Windows were tiny slits in the wall. Light barely entered. In winter, the cold crawled into your bones and never left. And here's the first secret. Most people inside a castle were not royalty. They were servants, guards, prisoners, and their lives were brutal. Imagine sleeping on straw, crawling with fleas, eating stale bread, drinking ale, because water could kill you. Sounds dramatic. It gets worse. Many castles, including Château de Vincennes, had hidden prison cells below ground. No light, no warmth. Sometimes, prisoners were simply forgotten, left in darkness for years. Some historians believe screams from underground chambers echoed through the walls at night. And if you think torture chambers are just myths made for movies, think again. Devices like the rack were real. Interrogations were public. Pain was a warning to others. But here's a twist nobody talks about. Castles were also dangerously unhealthy. Toilets were just holes in the wall called garderobes. Waste dropped straight down the outer walls or into moats. Yes, the same moat that surrounded the castle for protection. In summer, the smell was unbearable. Disease spread fast. One infection could wipe out half the household. And what about safety? You'd think thick stone walls meant protection. But sieges turned castles into slow death traps. When enemies surrounded a fortress like Chateau Gaillard, no food could enter. Supplies ran out. People ate rats, leather, even their horses. Starvation wasn't rare. It was expected. Now imagine living every day knowing that boiling oil, flaming arrows, or a battering ram could crash through your gates at any moment. Fear was constant. But here's another dark secret. The walls didn't just keep enemies out. They kept people in. Royal women were often trapped inside for political reasons. Marriages were arranged for power, not love. Young girls sent away to cold fortresses they had never seen. Some never returned home. And if you betrayed the lord of the castle, punishment was swift. Execution could happen in the courtyard. Heads displayed on spikes as a message. Loyalty wasn't requested. It was enforced. Even the architecture had hidden cruelty. Spiral staircases were built clockwise on purpose. Why? Because most attackers were right-handed. Defenders coming down had the advantage. Attackers going up struggled to swing their swords. Every stone was designed for killing efficiency. Romantic, right? But here's something even stranger. Castles were incredibly noisy. Blacksmiths hammering metal, animals in courtyards, soldiers training, babies crying, no privacy, no silence, and at night, total darkness. No street lights, just torches and shadows dancing on the walls. It's no surprise that ghost stories were born in places like Edinburgh Castle. People truly believed spirits haunted the corridors. When you live surrounded by death, disease, and war, your imagination turns against you. Now pause for a second. Picture yourself there. No heating, no soft bed, no medicine. One bad cut could mean death. One harsh winter could mean starvation. And here's the final reveal. Most people never realize. Castles were symbols of power, yes, but they were also symbols of insecurity. Kings and lords built them because they were afraid of invasion, afraid of rebellion, afraid of losing control. Those massive stone walls weren't signs of confidence. They were signs of constant threat. Medieval castles were not magical homes of brave knights. They were survival machines built in a violent world, cold, ruthless, unforgiving. So next time you see a castle on a postcard or in a movie, remember this. Behind every beautiful tower was a story of hunger, fear, and silence that history rarely tells. And the real dark secret: if you lived back then, you probably wouldn't survive a single winter inside those walls. You think we've uncovered the worst of medieval castles? Not even close, because what happened behind closed doors was often more dangerous than the wars outside. Power inside a castle was a silent game, and losing that game could cost you everything. Take Warwick Castle. Today it looks majestic. Back then, it was a chessboard of betrayal. Lords didn't just fight enemies, they feared their own allies. A trusted knight at dinner could be your assassin by midnight. Poison was quiet, quick, invisible. Meals were tasted by servants first, not out of kindness, but suspicion. And if you were a servant, your life meant nothing in that test. Now imagine the great hall, long wooden tables, fire roaring, meat roasting. It looks warm, almost comforting. But here's the twist. Most people in that hall were constantly being watched. Conversations were monitored. Spies existed long before modern intelligence agencies. Information was power, and walls had ears, literally. Some castles were designed with hidden listening passages. Secrets never felt safe. And what about children growing up inside these walls? They weren't running freely in green fields. Noble boys were trained early for war, swords heavier than their arms, discipline harsher than modern boot camps. By their teenage years, they had seen blood. Some had spilled it. Childhood ended fast. For girls, it was different, but not better. They were political tools, sent to other fortresses like Warwick Castle to secure alliances. Homesickness didn't matter. Love didn't matter. Obedience did. And here's something people rarely talk about: fire. Castles were stone, yes, but inside, wood everywhere. Roof beams, floors, furniture. One small spark from a torch could turn sections into an inferno. Water was limited. Panic spread faster than flames. There are records of entire castle wings collapsing in a single night. Safety was an illusion. Now let's go underground again. Storage rooms, armories, hidden tunnels. Some castles had secret escape routes carved into rock. If defeat was certain, the lord could flee while others stayed behind. Loyalty was demanded, but not always returned. Think about that. You defend the walls, you starve during the siege, and when the end comes, the powerful escape through a hidden tunnel beneath your feet. Brutal, right? But the psychological pressure might have been worse than the physical danger. Isolation was extreme. Winters felt endless. Snow blocking roads. No news from the outside world for months. Rumors became truth. Fear became constant. If disease entered the castle, gates were shut tight, no one in, no one out. It wasn't protection anymore. It was quarantine. And then there were dungeons like those rumored beneath Hohensulzberg Fortress. Dark pits where prisoners didn't just wait for trial. They disappeared. Chains fixed to walls. Minimal food. Total darkness. Time lost meaning. Some captives confessed to crimes they didn't commit just to end the silence. Now here's a twist that changes everything. Castles weren't only threatened by outsiders. Sometimes the greatest danger was rebellion from within the village below. Peasant twos worked the land that fed the fortress. If harvests failed, anger grew. Heavy taxes made it worse. A starving population with pitchforks can be just as terrifying as an invading army. So those grand towers, they stood over people who often hated the ones inside. And let's talk about hygiene again, because it gets darker. Bathing was rare. Parasites were common. lice in hair, fleas in bedding, chamber pots emptied from windows. The smell inside some corridors was so strong it clung to clothes permanently. Perfumes weren't luxury. They were survival tools. Imagine trying to rule a kingdom while constantly sick from infections, dental pain, or untreated wounds. Even kings suffered. A tooth abscess could kill. A minor fever could spread into something unstoppable. There were no antibiotics, no painkillers, just prayers and crude remedies. And here comes the final secret most movies will never show you. Many castles were symbols of fading power. As warfare evolved, cannons made thick walls vulnerable. Fortresses that once seemed invincible crumbled under artillery fire. The very structures built to guarantee dominance slowly became outdated, obsolete, massive stone monuments to a system that couldn't adapt fast enough. So the real dark truth of medieval castles isn't just torture, disease, or betrayal. It's this: they were built on fear, maintained by control, and constantly threatened by change. They looked eternal, they felt unstoppable, but inside, they were fragile ecosystems of tension and survival. Every day was uncertainty. Every night carried risk. And if you think living in a castle meant safety and glory, the reality is this: you were either fighting, serving, starving, plotting, or praying. There was no peace, only pressure. And the higher you lived within those walls, the harder you could fall. The mind games. Because the greatest weapon inside a castle, snade a sword. It was control. Step inside a fortress like Windsor Castle. It looks magnificent, timeless. But imagine living there when every smile could hide ambition. Power struggles didn't always explode into open violence. Sometimes they moved slowly, quietly. A rumor placed in the right ear, a forged letter, a whisper about treason. One accusation could destroy an entire family. And here's the twist: justice inside castle walls was often decided by the very person who accused you. Trials were swift, evidence thin, punishments permanent. Now think about loyalty. Knights swore oaths, hands on holy books, promises to defend their lord to the death. But oaths were fragile when money or land was offered by a rival. Alliances shifted like sand. In castles such as Conwy Castle, built to dominate rebellious regions, the threat of uprising was constant. The castle didn't just protect rulers from foreign invaders, it protected them from the people they governed. That tension never disappeared. It lived in every corridor. And then there was the chapel, the spiritual heart of the castle. Prayer was not optional. Religion shaped every decision. If crops failed or illness spread, people believed it was punishment from God. Fear wasn't only physical, it was eternal. The idea that you could suffer in this life and the next created a powerful tool for obedience. Question authority, risk your soul. But here's something even more unsettling. Entertainment inside castles often involved violence. Public executions were events. Crowds gathered. Children watched. It reinforced hierarchy. It reminded everyone of consequences. Mercy was rare because fear was more effective. Now imagine the psychological toll of watching someone you know punished in the courtyard below your window. You'd never forget it. You'd never step out of line. And here's another secret. Not everyone inside wanted to stay. Some nobles felt trapped by duty. Marriages arranged for alliances turned into lifelong prisons. Affairs sparked scandals. Scandals sparked wars. Love was dangerous. Trust was dangerous. Even laughter could be misunderstood as mockery. In a place like Croc de Chevalier, far from home for many Crusader knights, isolation amplified everything. Homesickness mixed with paranoia. Foreign land. Constant threat. The walls felt less like protection and more like confinement. And let's talk about sound, because silence in a castle was almost impossible. Footsteps echoed on stone. Doors creaked. Armor clanked. You always knew someone was nearby. Privacy barely existed. Conversations could be overheard through tapestries or thin wooden doors. Secrets were fragile. Sleep was light. A sudden shout in the night could mean fire, or attack, or arrest. Your body never fully relaxed. Now here comes a twist that changes how you see castles forever. Many of them were built using forced labor, peasants hauling stone, craftsmen working under harsh conditions. Some died during construction. So those majestic towers rising against the skyline, they were monuments built on exhaustion and sacrifice. Every block carried a human cost. And when a castle fell, and many did, the aftermath was merciless. Invading armies looted everything. Food stores emptied. Art destroyed. Survivors enslaved or executed. The same walls that once promised safety became cages. There was no heroic last stand like in the movies. Often it ended in smoke and screams. Even daily meals carried tension. Food shortages created hierarchy at the table. The lord ate fresh meat. Soldiers received smaller portions. Servants got scraps. Inequality was visible at every bite. Resentment quietly grew. Now imagine disease entering during the siege. No doctors, no escape. The sick isolated in cold, cham, burrs. Bodies buried quickly, sometimes within castle grounds. The smell of decay mixing with smoke from the hearth. You couldn't outrun it. You could only hope it spared you. And finally, here is the ultimate reveal. Castles were designed to project strength, but they reveal humanity's deepest insecurity. They show how afraid people were of losing power, land, faith, status. Every moat, every drawbridge, every murder hole carved above a gate was a physical expression of fear. Castles weren't just homes or military bases. They were psychological fortresses, built because trust was scarce, because peace was fragile, because survival depended on dominance. So when you see a castle today standing peacefully under a blue sky, remember this: its beauty hides centuries of anxiety, ambition, suffering, and relentless tension. It wasn't a fairy tale setting. It was a pressure cooker of politics, war, faith, and fear. And if you lived there, you wouldn't just battle enemies outside the walls. You'd battle suspicion inside them. You'd navigate hunger, hierarchy, disease, and doubt every single day. The stone might look eternal, but life inside was anything but stable. In the end, the darkest secret of medieval castles isn't torture or war. It's this: they prove that the people who seemed the most powerful were often the most afraid.